Look at the screen, not the one in front of you right now, but that internal monitor where images woven from the most scorching revulsion flicker. What if I told you that what makes your soul convulse and your blood boil with righteous or perhaps utterly irrational anger is the clearest manifestation of the absolute shadow? Not a mythical, horned lord of the underworld, but that real, tangible pole of irritation, which like an invisible hook latches onto the deepest, most vulnerable strings of your psyche. Imagine this archetype not as a biblical monster, but as something strangely mundane, disgustingly familiar. Perhaps it's the face of a politician whose arrogant smirk in your news feed triggers a wave of almost physical nausea, an uncontrollable urge to smash the screen just to avoid seeing this embodied evil. Or perhaps it's that blogger whose false virtue or cynical bravado provokes a burning, almost instinctive urge towards aggression, towards shattering their illusion. This isn't mere antipathy, not simple disagreement. It's a deep, irrational repulsion you feel towards what seems to be the quintessence of everything most repulsive, most vicious, everything that contradicts your internal moral compass of good and evil. This reaction isn't just an emotion, it's an earthquake in the depths of your soul, triggered by an encounter with something you unconsciously label as ultimate evil, as the absolute shadow. Or perhaps this pole of irritation manifests much more intimately in that moment when, looking into the mirror of your soul, you confront your own unappealing truth, the shadow of ambition bordering on ruthlessness, the shadow of strength capable of wounding, the shadow of vulnerability you so desperately try to hide. And this internal repulsion, this inner devil that you so fiercely reject externally, is merely a projection, an echo of what you cannot or will not accept within yourself. This absolute shadow, this archetypal devil you so vehemently reject, is a mirror reflecting your own unrevealed potential, sealed beneath layers of shame, fear, and societal prohibitions. It is in this convulsive reaction, this primal revulsion, that not only the key to understanding your own deep fears and suppressed desires lies, but also an unimaginable power, a power hidden within the rejected aspects of your psyche, in those qualities that could become the source of your true strength, but were branded as dark or dangerous. When you feel this burning, this internal struggle, know that you stand on the threshold of a great discovery. For the energy you spend on rejection, on fighting external evil, can be redirected towards internal transformation, towards the integration of these rejected parts. This is not a battle against evil. It's a battle for the integrity of your own self. But why does this mechanism, this internal alarm, activate with such ruthless precision? Why do precisely these images, these archetypal echoes, trigger such a powerful internal earthquake rather than just mild irritation? To understand this unbreakable connection, this instinctive repulsion, we must delve into the abyss of time where the first stones of your personal shadow were laid, where the first, barely perceptible, yet fateful crime against the integrity of your soul occurred, defining what to consider light and what to consider impenetrable darkness. Look into the bottomless well of your past, into that invisible yet deeply felt archive of the soul, where not dates but the imprints of your first encounters with reality are stored. It was there, in the labyrinth of childhood, that the fundamental split originated, which subsequently formed your personal shadow, the extreme point of which we call absolute evil. Recall not a specific day, but the emotional landscape, the moment you first realized that qualities now appearing monstrous or unacceptable to you, your untamed, still unbridled ambition, primal, defensive aggression, the tenderness of raw vulnerability, the right to make mistakes, to stumble, to acknowledge your own dark, instinctive side, were not just undesirable, but dangerous, shameful, forbidden. This was not an act of knowledge, as with the tree of good and evil, but an act of self-denial. Was it a sharp parental reprimand when your will asserted itself too boldly? A whisper in a religious home, branding natural desires as sin of the flesh or pride? Or perhaps the cold alienation of peers when your healthy competitiveness was called malice and a genuine impulse, showboating? Maybe it was a teacher's gaze transforming curiosity into disobedience, or the icy silence following an outburst of righteous anger, teaching that fury, even if motivated, is an abomination, or the crushing shame of a mistake, not as a lesson, but as an indelible stain on your essence, forever distorting your worth. It was then, or rather in a series of such moments, that the first stitches were placed on your still tender psyche. Every no to an authentic impulse, every don't be like that in response to an emerging aspect of yourself became a surgical incision. We learned to amputate parts of ourselves not because they were inherently evil, but because they threatened our belonging, our safety, our right to be loved. We learned to fear our own power, our own darkness, for the world around us, in its well-intentioned but limiting wisdom, instilled in us that these energies were too powerful, too destructive, too bad. A child desperately seeking acceptance and survival internalizes these judgments. And so the powerful energy of ambition, the vital force of aggression, not violence, but assertiveness, the profound truth of vulnerability, the freedom to err and learn, they do not disappear. They are merely banished, driven into the psyche's underground chambers where, deprived of light and air, they begin to fester, transforming into the raw material for that personal, absolute shadow, that internal devil, whispering of worthlessness, forbidden desires, and that terrifying power you dare not acknowledge. This is the fertile ground where the projection of external evil takes root, in the rejected aspects of our own unlived life. But the energy of these exiled parts does not dissolve into oblivion. It merely awaits its hour, its return home, its recognition. For what is the shadow, if not the echo of what is unsaid, unmanifested, unaccepted within ourselves? We've already touched upon how, within the depths of childhood, under the scrutinizing gaze of the world and its judgments, this internal banishment was formed. Every quality once natural and vital, be it ambition that strives for peaks, or vulnerability that opens the heart, or even pure, unfiltered aggression as a manifestation of life force, was anathematized, banished from the inner tribe of our consciousness. They became personae non gratae in the temple of our self, rejected for the illusion of acceptability for perceived safety. But what is banished does not disappear. It merely retreats into the depths, acquiring a different form, a different power there, the power of an unpaid bill. Imagine the energy that was meant for creation, for the manifestation of your true will, for healthy confrontation or sincere vulnerability. This energy was not expended as intended. It remained suspended, like an overdue obligation, accumulating, condensing, demanding its recognition and realization. And when this accumulated, suppressed energy seeks an outlet, it often finds it in the mechanism of projection. We, unwilling or afraid to acknowledge these rejected parts within ourselves, easily discover them externally. We see them in other people, in phenomena, in ideologies that provoke irrational repulsion, anger, contempt, sometimes bordering on obsession. This is not just a glance. It's a mirror reflecting our own carefully concealed darkness. We hate in others what we fear to acknowledge in ourselves. And then that very unpaid bill energy, which should have been directed towards internal integration and healing, poisons our world, coloring it with the shadows of an alien, but in reality, our own banished demon. Recall the picture of Dorian Gray. Isn't it a metaphor for this merciless projection? While Dorian maintains outward perfection, embodying the ideal of beauty and innocence, his true self, his shadow, his ruthless actions and moral degradation manifest on the canvas. The portrait becomes a receptacle for all the horror he refuses to acknowledge within himself, but which is in reality his true essence. This painting is the unpaid bill of his soul, which he refuses to settle, but which relentlessly demands its due. And the longer he turns away from this truth, the uglier and more repulsive his shadow, captured on the canvas, becomes, driving him to madness and self-destruction. Similarly, when we unleash our inner rage upon the world, we are in fact only seeing reflections of our own unaccepted aspects. This process isn't limited to abstract concepts. It manifests in concrete images, in the types of people who become our personal embodiments of the absolute shadow. Just as Dorian Gray unknowingly brought all the flaws of his soul onto the canvas, so too do we, guarding our own hidden corners, project onto the world the figures that become our external devils. These are not merely people who cause dislike. They are archetypal carriers of our collective and personal shadow, generating irrational repulsion, almost physical nausea, for they mercilessly expose what we have suppressed within ourselves. The first such archetype is the cold strategist. This is not merely a manipulator. It's an architect of others' destinies, whose schemes are flawless and whose heart seems carved from ice. They see people only as pawns on a chessboard, resources to achieve their goals. Their ambitions are boundless, and their capacity for compassion is atrophied. The pinnacle of their manifestation is a ruthless leader whose decisions shatter millions of lives for an abstract goal, or a corporate predator capable of destroying a competitor without batting an eye, solely to grow their empire. An encounter with such a person provokes not just dislike, but a deep, irrational contempt bordering on hatred, for they embody the absolute absence of moral coordinates that we so desperately seek within ourselves and the world. Recall Gennady. He was a classmate of mine and later a colleague. Initially, it seemed he possessed an incredible talent for analysis, for foresight, but it soon became clear Gennady was not just talented, he was unprincipled. His career was paved with the bones of those who stood in his way. He could smile to your face, promise support, and then, with cold, almost clinical precision, strike. He framed people, slandered, hijacked projects, appropriated others' ideas. His eyes remained vacant as he watched someone's life, reputation, or dreams crumble. He had no open enemies because no one could predict his next move, his next maneuver. Gennady was always one step ahead, always flawless on paper, and always left a trail of shattered destinies, like an invisible predator feeding on others' failures. He never felt guilt, never doubted. This absolute impenetrable certainty in his righteousness, even when built on lies and betrayal, evoked in me not just disgust, but an almost mystical dread, a feeling as if you had encountered something inhuman, incapable of empathy, soulless. His flawlessness was a mask concealing an abyss. The second archetype is the righteous fanatic. This is a figure consumed by a single, unshakable truth, which they are willing to impose at any cost. Their beliefs are absolute, their morality uncompromising, and their worldview black and white. They tolerate no dissent, seeing any deviation from their dogma as the embodiment of evil. The fanatic can be religious, political, ideological. The essence remains the same. They are willing to sacrifice others' lives and freedoms for the triumph of their justice. Their obsession is so all-consuming that they do not see living people beyond their abstractions, do not hear their suffering. They provoke irrational rage because their rigidity and inability to dialogue, their moral superiority, which they carry like a banner, seem to embody a blind, destructive force devoid of humanity. They are a living reproach, pointing to our own inability to be as convinced about something, or conversely, to our fear of becoming like them. These figures, the cold strategist and the righteous fanatic, are merely two facets of one large mosaic of the absolute shadow. They provoke deep irritation within us because they mirror aspects of power, authority, and conviction that we ourselves may have suppressed, deeming them dangerous, evil, or socially unacceptable. And in this rejection, in this irrational hatred, lies the key to understanding what valuable part of ourselves we once exiled. Our previous delve into the depths of the psyche painted before us the faces of the absolute shadow, those internal poles of repulsion that manifest externally as irrational hatred for the cold strategist or the righteous fanatic. But what if these frightening images are not merely projections of external evil, but distorted, disfigured reflections of our own suppressed strengths? What if within every demon we banish into the depths of our unconscious, there lies an unclaimed gift, a precious resource awaiting its transformation? Imagine an alchemical crucible where revulsion transmutes into understanding. Let's look into the shadows of the cold strategist, who evokes a mystical dread in us with their unscrupulousness and boundless ambition. We've seen them as manipulators, viewing people merely as resources, devoid of compassion. But what primordial energy is hidden beneath this icy mask? It is the capacity for strategic thinking, for cold, calculated analysis, allowing one to see 10 steps ahead, discarding emotional attachments when necessary to achieve great goals. It is an indomitable will to manifest power, to realize grand designs, to build one's own empires, be it in business, art, or social endeavors. It is the right to assert one's boundaries and interests with firmness and clarity, without regard for others' expectations or manipulations. The fear of being heartless or ambitious to the point of evil often deprives us of the ability for effective leadership, for making difficult but necessary decisions, for protecting ourselves and our vision from external chaos. We have forbidden ourselves from being so strong, so results-focused, so ruthless towards our own weaknesses that it has distorted our natural need for efficiency and achievement. Let's shift our gaze to the righteous fanatic, a figure obsessed with a single truth, intolerant of dissent, willing to sacrifice others' lives for their convictions. Their rigidity and inability to dialogue provoke irrational rage. But what light, however blinding, burns in their heart? It is unshakable conviction, the deepest faith in one's principles and values, a willingness to defend them to the end, regardless of worldly opposition. It is the capacity for radical honesty with oneself and others, even if that truth is destructive. It is the necessity of having one's own internal, unshakable truth, a moral compass that will not waver under the pressure of conformity or trends. The fear of being a fanatic, dogmatic, or intolerant often deprives us of the right to our own clearly articulated convictions, to moral fortitude, to the courage to say no to what contradicts our inner essence. We have banished into the shadow our inner faculty capable of discerning, judging, and acting in accordance with higher principles, fearing it would become an instrument of destruction. Thus, each of these demons is not so much an embodiment of evil from outside, but a distorted message from the depths of our own psyche. These are aspects of power, strength, and conviction that we once rejected, branding them as dangerous or shameful. What valuable capacity, what inherent right to being in its fullness have we forbidden ourselves by banishing into these depths the fear of absolute evil and its manifestations within us? The answer to this question opens the path to reclaiming wholeness, to integrating those energies that were fractured and suppressed. The non-acceptance of these internal forces, their constant denial, not only creates internal conflict, but also projects it outward, shaping the reality in which we inevitably confront what we so fiercely reject within ourselves. And this confrontation, this dance with the shadow, has its consequences. We spoke of demons, didn't we? Of those archetypal faces that show us distorted images of our own strength, our suppressed qualities, the cold strategist, the righteous fanatic. But what happens when this strength, this potential, this inner demon remains not just unrecognized, but actively rejected, locked away in the psyche's basements? Then it doesn't disappear. It creates chaos, not from without, but from within, sprouting through the cracks of our will, our decisions. It is precisely the fear of resembling these demons, of manifesting dark sides, of being bad, powerful, destructive in a constructive sense, that compels us to make disadvantageous decisions, to avoid strength, or to suppress our potential. Imagine a person whose inner being whispers of unshakable will, of the capacity for strategic calculation, even ruthless efficiency when the situation demands it, qualities they see in the cold strategist they despise. But the world, or an internal censor, has branded these qualities as devilish, inhuman. And so this person stands on the verge of important negotiations where firmness is needed, where boundaries must be asserted, perhaps even outmaneuvering an opponent, the fear of being manipulative, heartless, the fear of demonstrating the very will to power they so despise in others, paralyzes them. They agree to unfavorable terms, concede, avoid conflict just to avoid appearing bad, aggressive, like that very demon. The result? A lost opportunity, undermined dignity, an internal cry of powerlessness. Their potential for self-assertion, for building strong foundations, for healthy ambition was suppressed not by an external enemy, but by their own fear of becoming one. Or consider another facet, one who carries within them the energy of the righteous fanatic, unshakable conviction, the capacity for radical honesty, for defending their truth, even if it's uncomfortable and causes repulsion in others. But they've been taught that being too categorical, too confident, is a path to intolerance, to loneliness, to the very fanaticism that destroys the world. And so witnessing injustice or being a person whose deep values are trampled upon, they remain silent. They avoid confrontation, don't express their stance, fearing to be inflexible, obsessed, like them. Their inner honesty suffocates. Their moral compass loses its bearings. They become part of what they despise because their fear of manifesting their dark, in this case unyielding and uncompromising, strength proves stronger than their will to truth. They make disadvantageous decisions, remaining in situations that contradict their deepest principles, just to avoid being like the demon they so frighten themselves with. And a third example, perhaps the most painful. Imagine that for your growth, for your liberation, something must be destroyed. An old habit, a toxic relationship, limiting beliefs, even a part of your former comfortable identity. But within us lives a deep fear of destructive power, of the ability for irreversible change. We fear being bad, heartless, or selfish when we let go of what drags us down. This fear of being powerful in the sense of being able to transform, to tear down the old for the new, leads to stagnation. We remain trapped, held captive by dysfunctional patterns because we fear manifesting that very devilish resolve capable of severing what has outlived its purpose. We suppress our potential for renewal, for self-preservation, because we fear becoming demons whose destructive power seems to us absolute evil. And here arises a natural question, a whisper of anxiety, an echo of ancient myths. If I embrace these aspects, will I not become the very monster I so fear? Will this shadow not consume me? This is a profound misconception. The unaccepted shadow residing in the subconscious already controls you. It projects onto the world. It distorts your perception. It dictates your fears and your avoidances. Your suppressed aggression can manifest as passive aggression or self-aggression directed inward. Your suppressed will to power can manifest as chronic victimhood, an inability to say no, or an endless craving for others' approval. The true danger is not in the presence of these energies, but in their unconsciousness, in their autonomous existence outside your will. Integrating the shadow is not giving yourself permission to be evil or destructive for destruction's sake. It is the conscious mastery of the full spectrum of your inner forces, including those that seem dark or devilish only because they don't fit into our narrow definitions of good. It's the understanding that the will to power can be used for creation, for protecting yourself and your values, for transforming the world for the better. It's the recognition that destructive energy can be used to break down old limiting patterns to clear the path for the new. When you become aware of these energies, you cease to be their puppet. You become their master, capable of directing them constructively rather than letting them chaotically control your life, leading to failures and suffering. You stop making disadvantageous decisions out of blind fear and instead begin to act from inner wholeness and conscious strength. However, there is another equally subtle trap that consciousness falls into when avoiding an encounter with its shadow. This is not only the fear of being like a demon, but also something opposite, yet paradoxically similar in essence, the urge to externalize one's power, projecting it onto those we consider perfect, mighty, or who have already overcome their own depths. This phenomenon is as insidious as the fear of absolute evil, for it deprives us of our own inner divinity. We spoke of the shadow, that dark abyss that swallows our unappealing qualities, casting them into the subconscious, only for them to manifest in the world as hatred for others' vices, mirroring our own exiled aspects. But there is another, no less insidious captivity woven from golden threads of admiration. This is the golden shadow. It is no less destructive, for it deprives us not only of wholeness, but also of our own divine spark. If the ordinary shadow is what we fear within ourselves and project as repulsion, then the golden shadow is what we adore in others and give to them as a gift, unaware that it is our own unutilized greatness. These are hidden talents, untapped potential, those hours of our soul that shine so brightly that we are afraid of their power and prefer to see them reflected in others' eyes. Imagine how often, in awe of the genius of an artist, a visionary, a leader, we inadvertently transfer to them our own capacity for creation, deep insight, indomitable will. We see in them the embodiment of strength, power, transformation, forgetting that these qualities are merely echoes of our own, slumbering within. Who among them is your unspoken idol, the one whose presence or deeds evoke trembling admiration in you? It could be a mystical figure whose wisdom seems unattainable, or a strong leader whose resolve inspires and simultaneously overwhelms, or a creative genius whose ability to transform the world with words or images seems supernatural. Consider, whom do you believe has dealt with their dark side? Who, in your opinion, has achieved ultimate harmony or unshakable strength? Perhaps it's an ancient sage who conquered their demons, or a modern strategist whose will seems unbreakable, or a spiritual teacher whose serenity appears absolute. Look closely at them. What are your own talents? What unrealized abilities, what aspects of your inner divinity have you, in essence, gifted to them by projecting your own unutilized power onto them? This act of giving, this transference of your own light onto another's pedestal, it is the most subtle sabotage of your own destiny. It deprives you of the energy necessary for your own transformation, for the manifestation of your unique strength. You become a spectator of your own life rather than its creator, believing that true power and perfection exist somewhere out there, externally, in those you idolize. This projection keeps you in the shadow, even if it's a golden one, preventing you from shining fully. It whispers, you cannot be like them. Yet the truth is you already possess these qualities and perhaps even surpass them in your unique manifestation. To understand and reclaim these golden projections means to begin piecing yourself back together, recovering what was unconsciously given away. This is a step towards true wholeness, towards realizing that you are not only a vessel of suppressed demons, but also a bearer of a divine spark capable of transforming the world. It is the understanding that your path to power and transformation lies not in imitation, but in deep acceptance of the entire spectrum of your being, both light and shadow. For only when we stop seeing ourselves merely as reflections of others' greatness and flaws can we truly encounter what is hidden in the innermost corners of our own being, that primal force awaiting its moment to be not just recognized, but embodied. We have spoken of the shadow, its manifestations, and the golden shadow. But how do we reclaim the power scattered within these projections? How do we extract it from the abyss of rejection and the radiance of admiration? For true power, genuine wholeness is not fleeing the devil nor prostrating before a God outside yourself, but a conscious mastery of the entire spectrum of one's being. This is a philosophy that demands courage to acknowledge that the energy we expend hating absolute evil or deifying an ideal is our own energy held captive by projections. The devil is not an external enemy to be vanquished with the sword of righteousness. It is merely the ultimate image of our own suppressed power, our unintegrated shadow, which, if not recognized, will control us from the darkest depths. To reclaim this scattered power, I offer you a simple yet profound exercise. Find a moment of quiet when the external world recedes and only the pulsation of your inner landscape remains. Step 1. Encountering the extreme. Recall an image that evokes an irrational, almost physical revulsion in you, something you might call your absolute evil, your personal devil, or conversely an image you idolize to which you attribute incomparable qualities unattainable for yourself, your golden shadow. Choose one to begin with. Step 2. Dissecting your response. Calmly examine this image. What specific qualities, actions, or character traits of this person or entity evoke such a powerful reaction in you? If it's revulsion, what exactly makes you so angry, fearful, or contemptuous? If it's admiration, what specific talents, what strength, what divine spark so entices you? Be utterly honest and detail your thoughts. Step 3. Discovering the mirror. Now comes the most crucial and perhaps most challenging step. Ask yourself, where does the seed of this quality reside within me? Where am I suppressing my own capacity for strategic toughness, for an uncompromising will, for radical honesty, for untamed ambition? Where am I denying my own potential for greatness, for manifesting unique talent, for unconditional love or influence? This is not an invitation to become evil or an ideal. It's an invitation to acknowledge the potential you project outward. Realize that what you perceive in another, in its extreme form, is merely an unrevealed facet of your own soul. Step 4. Integration and creation. How can you consciously integrate this seed into your life? How can you utilize this energy, whether it's the energy of darkness or light, for creation, for growth, for asserting your own wholeness? How can you direct your inner strategy towards noble goals, your fanatical devotion towards serving higher ideals, your golden spark towards unfolding your unique gift? This process is not about good and evil. It's about self-mastery. This act of reclaiming projections, this alchemical marriage of light and shadow within us, is merely the first step toward true individuation. For beyond the personal shadow, beyond the personal devil, lies something even more profound and daunting, the collective shadow, archetypes residing in the depths of the collective unconscious, awaiting their moment to manifest in history, culture, and our dreams. And how we encounter them determines not only our personal destiny, but also the fate of the